Chapter 12. When it was almost 10 o'clock, Bai Jing took off his earplugs. After a few minutes, a fat boy panted and pushed open the door, looked around the room, and sat next to Bai Jing with a bang, his round face full of smiles. "Hello, my name is Jin Mao." Bai Jing. Bai Jing turned his head to look at him and reported his name politely. The other party was wearing high-quality clothes, with a space button around his neck that could store objects, and the light brain on his wrist was also the latest style. It could be seen that his family was good, but he was sitting with him for some reason. "Is it Bai Jing? Your name is so nice." Jin Mao was a familiar one. He smiled at Bai Jing, glanced at the young men and women sitting in the back row, rolled his eyes and whispered, "Heh, I just can't get used to those rich kids who look higher than the top, look down on one and look down on that all day long. What's so great? Here, those who can pass the final assessment are the strongest." "Is the assessment difficult?" Bai Jing keenly grasped the word. He wanted to check the matters needing attention on training and assessment, but only found sporadic information on the Star Network, which shows that the assessment content has not been made public. "It's very difficult. Although the stone gambling apprentice is not high, it is the only way to get to the stone gambling master, and the examination questions every year are extremely abnormal. And no matter the number of applicants, only the top 100 are taken each time, and the pass rate is terrifyingly low. Like the ones in the back, many of them are taking the test for the second or even the third time. Ahem, it's my second time too." Jin Mao scratched his head a little embarrassedly. Last time he didn't even say he was in the top 100. He didn't even enter the top 500. There are too many people participating in the Gambling Stone Apprenticeship Assessment every year, ranging from a few thousand to tens of thousands, and the competition is fierce. Judging from this year, the number of this training room is 8, and there are more than 60 students in each training room. In this way, there are more than 500 people participating in the assessment in Proxima Centauri alone. All the planets of the entire empire together. I am afraid there are more people than in previous years. Cough. Although the question is abnormal, the top 30 who pass the assessment will get corresponding points. 5 points for the top 10, 3 points for the 11 to 20, and 2 points for the 21 to 30. The requirement for a first-level stone gambler is that the points reach 5 points. If you can get the top 10, you can be directly promoted from a stone gambling apprentice to a first-level stone gambling master. Jin Mao said a little excitedly, and when he talked about the back, his face couldn't help blushing. "That's 5 points. According to the regulations, every time a bet goes up 1 point, 5 points means that the bet goes up 5 times. Even according to the probability of losing 9 out of 10 bets, at least 50 games of stone betting are required. If you are unlucky, you don't know how many times." After listening to Jin Mao's words, Bai Jing silently set a goal in his heart, that is to get the top 10 in the assessment at any cost. As long as he becomes a first-level stone gambler, he can represent the Gu family in the stone gambling battle, and he can also repay Gu Yuanchao's favor as soon as possible. At 10 o'clock sharp, a middle-aged man dressed in a white retro robe with a pentagram pattern on his chest came to the training room. His expression was very serious. His sharp eyes glanced around the classroom, and the room was suddenly silent. The middle-aged man inserted the black memory chip into the holographic device, and after adjusting the angle, he began to introduce himself. "My name is Gao Ling, and everyone can call me Teacher Gao. Next, we will learn from the origin and characteristics of the planet to learn how to distinguish the field of wool and the type of leather." Bai Jing learned Jin Mao's operation and connected the virtual port on the desktop to the optical brain. For a moment, he felt that he was on a somewhat barren planet, and the violent sandstorm was blowing towards him, and Bai Jing immediately raised his sleeves to cover it. The wind and sand of the Carl Star is very large. So many rough jadeite stones are buried under the surface. After thousands of years of movement, a unique rough yellow sand cortex is formed. With the teacher's explanation, Bai Jing felt the changes of the Earth's crust, the ups and downs of mountains and rivers, and the trajectories of the wool movement were clearly seen. After exiting the virtual space, looking at the training room in front of him, Bai Jing's heart was full of shock. This immersive reality made him stunned, and at the same time, he was deeply impressed by the characteristics of Carl's star. Gao Ling displayed Carl Star's wool image in a three-dimensional form right in front of the classroom and began to explain the origin of wool, the crystal structure of the skin, the surface thickness, and the color classification. Bai Jing was very fascinated by it. Whenever Gao Ling explained a knowledge point, he quickly recorded the key words in his notebook, and at the same time replayed it in his mind at double speed. Jin Mao was recording on the optical brain electronic screen. When he saw Bai Jing took out an ancient Earth notebook, his eyes were full of shock. Laughing to death, what did that commoner take? Where did the old antique come from? The young men and women in the back even laughed out loud when they saw it, causing Gao Ling to knock on the desk heavily. Quiet! Bai Jing was calm and composed, and the pen in his hand did not stop at all. Compared with the electronic screen, he prefers the feeling of the pen falling on the paper, which will make his memory clearer. The reason why he can survive in the crisis-ridden apocalypse is his excellent learning ability and extraordinary adaptability. Otherwise, he would have been buried in the mouth of zombies long ago. Right now, he has too little understanding of interstellar and field knowledge, and the foundation is too weak. But as long as he finds the right method and trains hard, he believes that he will not lose to anyone. Bai Jing thought while taking notes. It wasn't enough to memorize keywords in class. He had to go back and review it several times to try to retell it completely. Gao Ling talked all morning and only talked about the performance of 2 or 3 wool materials. But he was very meticulous and worthy of being a professional teacher of the Stone Gambling Association. After his explanation, Bai Jing can barely identify the field where several different sandskin shell wool materials belong, and he can also say a thing or two about the performance of skin shells. It can be said that in the entire classroom, he is the one who has gained the most. Jin Mao saw that Bai Jing was still writing hard after class, and the notebook was full of dense handwriting, and was surprised by the other party's efforts. His family background is decent. His father is one of the 4 major robot manufacturers of Proxima Centauri, and he is well known in the middle and upper circles. It's just that with the current saturation of home robots, the family's business is going from bad to worse, and even his pocket money has been reduced a lot. Because of this, he wanted to become a stone gambler and wanted to open up another path for the family. Jin Mao thought that he had worked hard enough among his peers. Not only did he save his pocket money to buy wool, but he also often went to the wool area to watch other people gambling stones. But now, he looked at the text recorded on his light screen that was less than a page, and then looked at the notebook that Bai Jing remembered, and suddenly felt very ashamed. Bai Jing, I want to learn from you. The little fat man stared at each other with a fixed gaze, clenching his fleshy fists. In the afternoon, he also had to write down what the teacher said word by word. Bai Jing sorted out all the knowledge points in the morning, and half an hour has passed. It was noon, and everyone took out the nutrient solution to take it. Ning Yuxuan took out a high-grade nutrient solution from the space button, and the surface was glowing with fine streams of light, like a work of art. This nutrient solution is a customized flavor that has not yet been listed. It is only sold to aristocratic families and costs 2,000 stars for each. Seeing the envious eyes of others, Ning Yuxuan's lips curled into a smile, and she deliberately slowed down and drank gracefully. This is her favorite creamy strawberry flavor. The smooth and delicate taste has a sweet and sour fragrance, which is really a pleasure. Ning Yuxuan was enjoying the taste of high-grade nutrient solution and suddenly smelled a very strong aroma in her nose. It was the smell of curry beef. She would not be mistaken. She had eaten with her father at the Empire Rose restaurant several times before, and the taste was so delicious that her tongue was bitten off, and it is unforgettable to this day. But how can there be such a fragrant smell here? Jin Mao stared at the lunchbox that Bai Jing took out. The white rice grains were covered with potatoes and beef, and the rich soup had penetrated into the rice, exuding the unique aroma of curry. Looking at the tasteless nutrient solution in his hand, he was so greedy that his saliva was about to flow down. In the end, he couldn't bear the tempting smell and asked cheekily, Bai Jing, did you do this? Well, Bai Jing's movements were elegant but fast, and half of it was wiped out in a blink of an eye. You actually know how to cook ancient Earth food? The little fat man's eyes widened when he heard this. He had studied interstellar history. At that time, when the apocalypse broke out, there were only 1 million people left when human beings immigrated in a hurry. Jing, brother Jing, could you give me a portion of your lunch? Just a little bit. I'll just have a taste. Jin Mao looked at Bai Jing with pitiful eyes, causing the people who saw him a chill. Bai Jing frowned slightly. People who have experienced the end of the world will not easily share food with others. But thinking that Jin Mao told him about the assessment, he took out another box and gave him half a bowl. Woo, so delicious. The little fat man gulps down his face and burst into tears. He has never eaten such a delicious food since he was a child, and even high-grade nutrient solution is incomparable. The men and women around Ning Yuxuan took a deep breath and suddenly felt that the nutrient solution in their hands was tasteless, but their pride did not allow them to talk to a commoner, so they could only endure it silently. Several of them whispered, "Hey, did you just hear that the curry beef was made by the commoner himself? What if he did it? Are you going to ask him for it? Cough, I want to book tomorrow's lunch. Do you think 2,000 stars is enough?" You're crazy. Miss Ning hates lowly commoners the most, not to mention being from a slum. Do you want to anger her? Everyone was silent, gritted their teeth, and drank their own nutrient solution in the rich aroma, hoping that they would be able to resist the temptation of delicious food after being full. Ning Yuxuan tried her best to control her breathing so that she looked as usual without being affected in the slightest. In her heart, she thought to herself, I must ask her brother to take her to the Empire Rose restaurant for dinner at night, and she must order that curry beef. After Jean Mao finished eating, the automatic identification odor cleaning device was turned on immediately, and the indoor air was cleaned in 10 seconds, replacing it with a fresh smell like grass and trees. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and finally no longer had to be poisoned by this fragrance. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Gao Ling came to the classroom on time and started the afternoon class. He first briefly repeated the content of the morning, and then continued to introduce the impact of other planets on the surface of Wool. Time passed quickly, and by the end of the course, he had already finished talking about the performance of Wool at the entrances of several nearby stars and began to ask random questions. Ning Yuxuan held her head high. Since she was a child, she often followed her father to look at various wool materials in the wool material area, and she knew this knowledge very well. And her goal this time is very clear, that is to get the top 10 in the assessment and become an official stone gambler as soon as possible. Gao Ling glanced at her and asked her to answer the first question. What is the performance of the wool at the entrance of Carl Star number 1? Ning Yuxuan talked eloquently. Carl Star has a lot of sandstorms and intense crustal movement. The number 1 field entrance is an old pit species, so it has formed a unique yellow sand skin with gray spots, and the skin is thicker. The answer is perfect. Gao Ling's serious face softened a little, and he answered questions to a few people. These questions are relatively basic, and everyone's answers are also correct. He turned his eyes to the white scene sitting in the first row, and there was a touch of appreciation in his eyes. He was very fond of this simple-dressed young man, and the attitude of the other party in listening to the class was extremely serious. Any teacher would like such a student. So Gao Ling slightly increased the difficulty and asked a question that was not covered in the class but was still basic. As we all know, Carl and Dimo are companion stars to each other, and the environments of the two planets are roughly the same. How will the wool of these two planets be separated? Bai Jing quickly recalled every knowledge point that Gao Ling had mentioned in the class, but after searching his mind, he still could not find any relevant knowledge. So I said the truth, "Teacher, I'm really sorry, I can't answer." As soon as the voice fell, there was a burst of laughter from behind. Although the Stone Gambling Apprenticeship Assessment is difficult, the first day of the course is the most basic, most of which are common sense content, and then it will be deepened layer by layer. This commoner can't even answer such a simple question. Does it mean that he has to be the last one in the test? Oh, sure enough, everything that comes out of the slums is trash. Everyone looked at Bai Jing with contempt, and Ning Yuxuan frowned in disgust, as if staying in the same space with the other party was an insult to her. Gao Ling's eyebrows were also a little disappointed. He was also a commoner and knew the difficulties of commoners. The cost of stone gamblers is high, and the proportion of civilians is very small. To become a famous stone gambler, you must put in more than the usual number of efforts and get the support of the family with excellent performance. And the ranking of the Stone Gambling Apprentice Assessment is a good opportunity to show himself. Seeing this young man's meticulous attitude, he thought that there would be another stone gambler among the commoners, but he didn't expect that he couldn't answer even the most basic knowledge. That's it for today's class. Gao Ling didn't have the time to continue asking questions and immediately announced the get out of class.